Welcome to today's Bible study from College Lutheran Church, and from me, Pastor David Drebus. It's good for us to study God's Word, and we continue to do that using this list of the top 100 essential Bible passages. Now, you can find this list and other materials in the links related to this video, depending on where you're watching it. You'll also find links to the reading for each of these video studies, and I hope you're doing the reading before you watch the video. Today, our story is 2 Kings chapter 5. It's the story of Naaman the leper. This is another favorite, though this one might not be as widely known in our broader cultural context. But this is a favorite of mine, and if you've read it before, it's probably one of your favorites too. It has a lot going on in it. It has the illness of Naaman. It has the humbling and conversion of Naaman. And then it has the miraculous punishment of one of Elisha's servants. It's worth reading to the end to read what happens there. Well, first I want to mention that the prophet in this chapter is Elisha. He's the successor of Elijah, who we read about in our previous Bible study. Elijah has since ascended into heaven. If you may know the story of the chariots of fire that come and swoop and pick him up, Elisha is his successor. And so now Elisha is the prophet who's going about serving the Lord among the people of Israel. Other than knowing that Elisha is the prophet, we don't have a whole lot of information about when exactly today's story occurs. It's normal in the historical books in the Old Testament to tell us exactly who the king is at the time, and maybe even what year in his reign such and such happened. We're not told who the king of Aram is or who the king of Israel is. And that is a clue that what matters about this story is that it's, how do I want to say, it's more than history that we're getting here. The author isn't just trying to communicate to us some facts and dates and things like that. There's really some stuff here for us to ponder and spend time with. One thing that we should notice right away is that when Naaman reaches out to the people of Israel for healing at the direction of his servant, he reaches out to the king of Israel. That's who he expects to have the power to heal. And why shouldn't he? Somebody who has that power should have all sorts of riches. They should live in a palace, right, if they can heal people. Well, we know that's not how our God works, that God works through unexpected people, in unexpected places, and in unexpected ways. And so that's a lesson that Naaman has to learn. First, he reaches out to the king of Israel, but then he is sent to the humble home of Elisha. Elisha doesn't even come out to greet him. Naaman is very offended because he expected a healing person to wave his hands and put on a big show. And instead, through a servant, Elisha tells Naaman to wash in the river Jordan 7 times, and that would make him clean. So, that is very offensive to Naaman, and I think that deserves some focus from us. Why is that offensive? Well, first of all, the River Jordan is not a very clean river, so there's a yuck factor going on here. But also, you know, if the more work that's put into something, the more one feels they have earned it. And so there is something offensive about God's freely given gifts. If you want to be entitled to what you have, if you want to feel like you really earned your place in the world, your place before God, then there is something offensive about the bar being so low. So we say in our church that our place here is not something we've earned. Many of us in the Lutheran tradition were baptized when we were babies. I didn't earn my place. I was a month old when I was joined into the Christian church. And so there's something offensive about that if you want to feel proud of how much you've done to earn your place before God. This is very humbling. It's offensive if your whole life has been about what you've earned. But I hope that if we're ever offended by grace, we get to a point where we're simply humbled by it and appreciative of all that God has done for us. I think that needs to be where we end up. We don't want to stay offended by God's grace. But it's important to note that the very concept of grace can be offensive to some people. So he is humbled there. I love how he is humbled by the words of his servants who say in verse 13, "If the prophet had told you to do something difficult, would you not do it? How much more then if he says to you, wash and be clean?" So the servants say, hey, you were prepared to put on a big show and to do anything. And all he's asked you to do is go bathe in the river. Why don't you do it? There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you'll even prove the prophet wrong. They're sort of calling Elisha's bluff. So Naaman is miraculously healed. He declares in verse 15, "Now I know there is no God anywhere in the world except in Israel." And so he goes home promising to worship only the God of Israel, the Lord. But with one caveat, and he wants Elisha's blessing for this, and I find this intriguing. He says that when my master goes to the temple of Rimmon, that's their god, to worship, leaning on my arm, and I worship in the temple of Rimmon when he worships there, for this let the Lord pardon me. What he's asking for is permission to help his commanding officer, or maybe even his king, he says his master, to help him worship their idol. And I just find it interesting that Elisha gives him permission to do that, because we often think that being devoted to the Lord means never compromising. And it certainly often means that. But we have here a case where Naaman is asking for permission to help his master worship their idol. And he's given that permission, and I think it's because we have a lot of leeway when it comes to helping our neighbor. And he's not there to worship that idol himself, but this is an important ritual for Naaman's master, and he can't quite get there on his own, and so he needs to lean on somebody to go to that place. That is puzzling and troubling and comforting kind of all at once. It's puzzling that he gets permission to still go worship a false god. It's troubling because I don't want to take that too far and say it's okay to do anything for your neighbor's sake, and yet it's comforting that it seems we do get a lot of leeway when it comes to helping our neighbors. So I think that's enough for today. There's more to ponder in this chapter. I hope you read all of chapter 5 of 2 Kings, and I hope you'll tell me what you think, what puzzles you, what bothers you, and I hope you'll read about Elisha's servant and what happens to him. Peace be with you this week.